I'm sure some people will drop in, but yeah, I know Nicole will probably be here in a minute. Yeah, you feel free to go ahead and get started.
All right, guys. Of course, I'm Crystal. We know Crystal because she starts out every class and talks a lot. So I usually don't get nervous, but I am a little nervous just making sure that I do this right, considering I'm the guinea pig here and I'm the first one. I want to make sure that I'm doing everything to Dr. Yeager's standards because I already told him I'm not going to accept a B on this. So we watched The Untouchables this week. It was a film back in 1987. It was actually filmed in Chicago, and a lot of the Chicago landmarks and historical places were actually used in this film. Brian De Palma was your director. He had a career that spanned over 50 years, and he done films such as Carrie and Scarface, Mission Impossible, and he was influenced a lot by Alfred Hitchcock. He even directed the Bruce Springsteen's Dancing in the Dark music video in 1984, probably before most of you guys were born. So, but if you don't know who Bruce Springsteen is, ask your parents. Elliot Ness, he was played by actor and director Kevin Costner. Costner done films such as Bull Durham, Field of Dreams, Dances with Wolves. He actually won 2 Academy Awards for Dances with Wolves. And this role seemed to break Costner in. He wasn't the first or even the second choice, but this seemed to break him into stardom, and he has had an amazing career since. For his preparation for this role, he did go meet with FBI agent and untouchable Al Wallpaper Wolf, and he was finding some historical content, asking about Ness's mannerisms, trying to get that kind of thing down. And Oscar Wallace was played by Charles Martin Smith, and Smith wears many hats. He's an actor, director, writer, producer. He starred in films such as American Graffiti, The Buddy Holly Story, and his career continued mainly in supporting roles, but he did have a long career. George Smith, played by Andy Garcia, he's an actor and director. He actually rose to fame in this film as well, and he has had an amazing career. I mean, his career is all over the place. He's done TV and movies, and he's been in all of the Ocean's movies, Ocean's 11, 12, 13. He done he done Let's Be Cops and The Godfather Part 3, which Dad and I had a little debate on at one point, and The Mule back in 2018. Garcia was discovered by an agent as he was in a school play. So that's not something that you actually hear of actually coming to fruition, because a lot of times, you want your kid discovered whenever they're doing a school play, but that's not exactly how it happens. But an agent did discover him there. And Jim Malone, he was played by Sean Connery. He actually won an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor for this film. And Sir Sean Connery was a well-known actor. He passed away last year at the age of 90. He was the first actor to play the British secret agent James Bond. He proceeded to star in 7 Bond films between 1962 and 1983. I know some of you guys may remember The Rock, which is a little coincidental here because The Rock was about Alcatraz, and we actually see that Al Capone was one of the first to be housed in Alcatraz whenever it first opens its doors. So that's kind of a neat little coincidence, I guess. And Frank Niddy, Capone's enforcer, played by Billy Drago. And most of his work was in television. His film work was mostly known for being cast as a villain, as in Clint Eastwood's Pale Rider in 1985. He played also in The Hills Have Eyes, and he had an extensive career, but he was definitely the villain in almost everything that he played. I guess he just had that look and that kind of characteristic.
Real quick, scroll down on your Word document there.
Oh, I'm so sorry. And he died in 2019 at the age of 73. And Al Capone, played by let me get back up here. I'm sorry, guys. Played by infamous actor, producer, and director Robert De Niro. He's best known for his collaborations with Martin Scorsese. His list of accomplishments was, if I would have listed him, we would have had about 16 pages here. And he was actually given the Presidential Medal of Freedom by President Barack Obama. I thought that was an interesting point. It's not every day that you see an actor has been, given something like that. De Niro played in numerous mafia and gangster films, such as playing Vito Corleone in Francis Ford Coppola's The Godfather Part 2. And that's where Dad and I had our little disagreement back and forth till I had to prove it to him. But De Niro's research for this role of Al Capone included him reading and watching historical footage. And he wanted to gain 30 pounds because he felt that his face wasn't full enough, that he needed a bigger face because Capone had that bigger, fuller face. And De Palma, the director, even stated that De Niro was very concerned about the shape of his face. Sorry, guys, I didn't mean to knock stuff over. All right. That's our main actors. And now we'll get into a little backstory on the film. We have Brian De Palma's 1987 film, The Untouchables, was based on the autobiographical book by Elliot Ness. It was also co-written by Oscar Fraley. Elliot Ness was a federal agent of Bureau of Prohibition, and he formed a team called the Untouchables. Actually, Elliot Ness did not even know the success of all of this because whenever when his book come out, he had already passed away. So he was unaware of all of this that had happened because of what they had done and the Untouchables. They were a handful of incorruptible men who take on Al Capone, boss of the Chicago outfit, in the late 1920s and early 30s. Corruption was at peak during the Prohibition. Illegal business, paid off police and judges was a common practice at this time. The city of Chicago needed a hero or a cavalry to come in and save their day and save their city. Ness was a mere treasury agent as he began his work, and he was an inexperienced federal prohibition agent. In this corrupt political climate, a man like Ness would appear to citizens as the solution for their issues, but maybe appear to those who are paid off or the mob as just, someone there. They know what they're doing. They're in there just to try to prove to people that they're doing something right. And at the time, whenever this movie came out, we're looking at the 1980s, actually the latter part of the 80s. And President Ronald Reagan had gave hope to the Americans. We had optimism. We saw the collapse of the traditional communism and the end of the Cold War. The 80s signaled a period of conservation in social, economic, and political life. The Berlin Wall crumbled, new computer technologies emerged, blockbuster movies and MTV reshaped pop culture. That's whenever all that stuff come out, guys. I know you're a little young, but okay. And on the key scenes that I felt were key scenes, and you guys can give me your feedback in a moment. The opening scene where the little girl was blown up by the bomb in the briefcase. And I know there's been a lot of people come back and say that, it wouldn't be possible because she wouldn't have been able to lift such a heavy bomb. But, for the sake of the movie, that's what we're looking at. At 1634 Racine Avenue, when Malone was killed by Niddy, whenever the guy with the knife came in and he said, "Oh, you're going to bring a knife to a gunfight." And then, Niddy's just standing there on the steps. He's just waiting for his opportunity. And the train station, when the woman is struggling with her luggage and her crying baby, her fussy baby, and trying to get it up the steps, and you can just tell about the tension in that scene. You're watching the clock with him, and you just know that something's going to happen. That this bookkeeper is supposed to arrive at this time, and there's people coming in, they're arriving and departing for their trains, and it's just not working out with this woman and this crying baby. He knows what's getting ready to probably go down. He doesn't want that to happen. And the US Canadian border, whenever the Untouchables met with the Mounties, they're all sitting up on the hillside with their horses. I know that we had a mention of that and the projection of that whole scene. And they planned to go in there and catch them right in the act. And that was kind of an aha, kind of the cavalry's here to save the day kind of moment for me. Elliot Ness and Frank Niddy, whenever they were up on the rooftop and Frank was trying to scale down on the rope to try to get out of there. And then he climbs back up, and him and Elliot have this conversation about when Malone was murdered, saying that he screamed like an Irish pig whenever he was murdered. And that kind of got into Ness's emotions, and he then threw him off of the rooftop. And Capone at the opera, whenever he's showing emotion, he's actually crying at this man singing and what he's singing about. But whenever Niddy comes in to whisper in his ear and say, oh, well, Malone's dead, he has this smile come across his face. I mean, we look at that as twisted and backwards. I mean, okay, you want to get emotional at the opera, but you're not going to get emotional. You're going to be happy about someone losing their life. So to break into the themes of the film, lastly here, like eyes are always watching you. Don't you feel like in this movie, like the eyes are always, somebody's always watching somebody, whether it's Niddy on the side of the street telling Ness, hey, your little girl's in there, right? And, they're always watching each other. We even have Malone having his people watching and listening for Capone's ideas and their plans. That's how they got the information about, they were going to be doing that at the Canadian border on that bridge. And I'm sorry. Alfred Hitchcock calls scenes such as the train station scene, as we was talking about, like the looking at the clock and the suspense building and the music and just that feeling that you get. He calls that a ticking time bomb. And this is actually a ticking time bomb. I mean, the suspense builds as we feel emotion, and the climax builds. They are showing us the clock. There's a specific arrival time. The camera shows the doors, so you never know who's getting ready to come through that door. It's going to be, is it going to be him? Is it not going to be him? And it's someone from the Navy, or, just a couple of people, or a businessman. We watch as the woman struggles with her bulky luggage and her fussy baby. And we feel the tension build as he watches that child and that woman, because he is a good man. That he's a good man inside, and he doesn't want this kind of thing to happen in front of them or anything happen to them. We also see the dark side of corruption, as we did in Chinatown. We see in Chinatown, we've seen all the dark, right? But in this, you kind of see both sides. You see the dark side of corruption, and you see the good side as they are trying to bring the city of Chicago out of that, and how it affected Chicago in that time. So we had a slightly different view in this film than we did in Chinatown. And good and evil. I mean, obviously there's good and evil. We've got the Untouchables. They're good. They're morally good. They want what's right and what's best. And we see Capone, the evil, even as much as he tries to act like in front of the cameras and to anyone who asks him a question, he tries to act like, oh, well, I'm a good guy. I didn't do nothing. I'm all right. But he tries to act like, he's even a Robin Hood type of character. And he just puts on that smile for those public appearances. But he's actually a very vicious, cruel man. So what do you guys think? We're going to talk about I know the discussion questions that Dr. Yeager posted for me. Does somebody want to start and tell me what you thought about the movie as a whole? And then we'll go into specifics on scenes and things like that?
I'd love to start. I was really surprised by this movie. I've watched some gangster films, and I know one of the questions we were given was if we would define this as a noir film or a gangster film. And after watching it, I really think it's more of a gangster film. But my fiance, he's huge on these movies. He's seen all of them. He loves them. I had to tell him beforehand. I was like, don't spoil it. Don't tell me what happens, because he's already seen it. But I thought everything you said really fit with my conceptions of the movie and my thoughts on it. One point that I really like when I was watching it really stood out to me was the baby in the stroller. When that baby was falling down those steps, to me, it made me think about all the innocent people that were caught in this conflict between the Italian gangsters and the authorities of that time. I don't know if anyone else noticed that.
I didn't notice that, Nicole, but Dad and I were talking about, it may even been Dr. Yeager at one point. We were talking about how your views, I love that, because you will bring things out that I didn't necessarily think of in that manner, but I totally agree with. And you bring points out and views in movies that I really appreciate. So yeah, I believe that too. That's great. But yet they sit there and he slides in, Andy Garcia slides in and he's holding that baby up there, and he's still got his gun on him. So they're still there to save the day. So absolutely, that's great.
Yeah, I never even noticed. My bad to whoever was talking, but I never even noticed it. But yeah, that's like a perfect allegory for the entire just gang violence against policemen, and you just got all these innocent people just trying to do what they're trying to do, just trying to get through life, and they're just stuck in the middle of this.
Absolutely.
I liked also what you brought out about the time bomb that Alfred Hitchcock. In the scene where we see Andy Garcia lying in the floor of the station, he's lying there in position. He doesn't move. He stays in position. Whether you've seen this movie or not, he's going to fire that gun because they've already built him up as a sharpshooter. You already know somewhere along the line that this character is going to fire that gun. And this is the perfect place for that. But he's got to make the perfect shot, and he has to live up to his expectations that were made of him. And I love that. I've never heard about the time bomb until I read it in your paper. And Alfred Hitchcock was famous for the time bombs. And when it finally clicks in, you almost, and it's terrible to see someone die, even in the movie, but you almost want to go, all right, that's one for the good guys. At least that's the way you feel during that episode. I thought it was a great scene.
And, I was so surprised that sharpshooter character was one of the only ones to survive in the end. Because, when we first encounter him, he's the only Italian one on the team. He gets questioned immediately, and then they just accept him when they see that he's a little bit standoffish. I felt that before I saw the ending, I felt that he would be one of the first ones to go because, the mob members would see that as a betrayal in a way. Just that assumed loyalty that a lot of different, groups have. And I was so surprised. And to me, it felt like the survival of all Italians in that era and how we have to realize that not all of those people were a part of that. And it really helps us not generalize. And I loved the way that they used him as a character in the movie.
Yeah, they were not all a problem. They were part of the solution too. Just depends on who you was looking at the time. That's a good point.
Corey, we go back to the casual racism in all of our movies, right? That you mentioned last time. This time it's against Italians.
Right.
Yeah, Sean Connery calls the one guy a Dago bastard, right before he gets shot. So.
I know I was kind of taken aback when I heard WAP being used. I was like, oh wow, that's where you're going there.
You have to remember this was 87 too. So I mean, we've had this little discussion before, but people either didn't voice their sensitivity or their heartfelt, how they actually felt about things like that. I mean, we're coming out of eras when we are actually a racist country, and we're still coming out of those eras, and developing and maturing as a country at that time. Anybody else want to say anything?
I had a feeling that I would kind of be expected to know how historically accurate it is, just because I'm the apparently the historian of the group.
You are.
I found a thing from actually like one of my favorite YouTubers that fact checks stuff like this. And he kind of goes down the list, and there was a lot of stuff that I wasn't for sure was going to be accurate. Like, I thought the whole idea of the Untouchables was just like, here's a group of guys that you can cling on to, and they're going to be the 4 guys that represent the hundreds of people that actually took Capone down. And turns out, I mean, 2 of them were. Malone wasn't real, and the Italian guy, I forgot his name, but he wasn't real. There weren't any Italians in the Untouchables group, but they kind of needed an Italian to be in there. That way it didn't look so black and white in the movie. It didn't look so only the Italians are bad type of thing. But like Crystal pointed out in our discussion, that like in her thread to my discussion, was that the guy in the glasses, Wallace, he was based on a real character, and he was like completely accurate in the sense that he was tasked with looking through every single piece of paper that had Al Capone's name on it to see if he could get him with tax evasion. But
Yeah,
on that
actually,
note,
for years. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
On that note, I was really kind of surprised when Wallace introduced the idea of getting Capone on the tax evasion, and everyone was like, nah, because part of me understood it. They wanted to get Capone for everything. They wanted him to go down for all the vile things that he'd done. They didn't want him to get off easy. And I felt that kind of almost dissuaded Wallace's belief in that plan. And in the end, that's what gave them the time and the ability to get everything else on him and to get justice brought into the picture. And I really just wish that he could have seen that through.
Yep. Same
He
here.
actually, in real life, I know in this movie, he was killed in the line of duty, but in real life, he was not killed. Wilson was his last name. There was a lot of similarities in this character, but he was not killed in the line of duty, and he actually went on to work on the Lindenberg kidnapping case. And we have a lot of history. You think about this theme that we keep going back to as far as the tax evasion. At the time, it was just unheard of. Why would you even care about his taxes when he's killing people and he's bringing liquor in and he's got whores over here? Like, why are you worried about his taxes? Well, they had to get something on him, and he was very clever and clean about how he kept things so that he did not get in trouble. Capone actually he was kicked out of school at 12 years old for getting into a physical altercation with his teacher. He then went to the streets, and there was just gang life around. He joined gangs. And at a very young teenage age, he became one of the most known killers around because he could kill. He was accurate. He done the job, but he didn't get caught. He was very precise in what that he done. So, I mean, they weren't going to get him for that. He had learned at an early age how to get by with it. So they was not going to get him for that. So bringing in that tax evasion was something that they could actually put some years on him. And like he said in the quote, it's better than nothing. So we do want to get something. Now we see most of our gangsters, that's what they get charged with. We have the RICO Act, and that's a lot of what they go down for.
Adding to the points about historical accuracy, the Niddy character was not pushed off a roof either. He was actually found later. He committed suicide. So that's how that particular person went out. It's an interesting scene just because it kind of makes Ness Reagan mentioned that she didn't think Ness was an anti-hero, but it arguably makes him one, right? Because he lets his emotions get the better of him, pushes him off the roof in revenge for killing Malone. But that's not historically accurate either. So that's a interesting point. Reagan, I don't know if you want to speak to that since you wrote about it.
I really just felt like, well, to be honest, I was kind of happy to see him do that. I guess that's a little bit heartless, but I was happy to see him finally to take a stand for him and his friends instead of, he walked a straight line the whole time, the whole way down, the whole way through everything. He wouldn't even go against the Prohibition Act himself. And we've seen almost every character do that, even on the good side. And, he wouldn't even do that. Like the very last line in the movie, he said, one of the reporters had asked him about the repeal of the Prohibition Act, and he said what he would do, and he said he would have a drink. And I just thought that really went towards his character, and I felt like I just felt like it was more of like a justified thing to do, I guess you would say.
Remember whenever he was talking to the police officers right before they went in and they busted up the big crates with the Canadian flag on it. We see him telling them, like, look, we are the good guys. We're here to fight this. So we are not going to do this. If you plan on, pretty much partaking in some alcohol, then you don't need to be here because that's not going to happen. Even breaking into that scene, it kind of gives you the illusion or makes you assume that someone had snitched him out, had let the other side know, hey, we're coming in, we're going to get this shipment, whatever. Maybe that's why he had the little umbrella for his big picture in the paper. But I loved that little character too, the little newspaper guy, how he wanted to be a part of that, wanted to catch that so much. What do you think about Capone's bookkeeper and Oscar Wallace? We have characteristics and differences. They're both working for something so dangerous, working towards something so dangerous, both very smart men. You've got Capone's bookkeeper who designed this code to where, it took them a while to figure this out. You have Wallace that was so intelligent that he knew to go for his books. He studied his books. Even in actual history, he spent years studying everything that he could find on Capone on his books, anything that he had coming and going. So, we see that they're all against Capone in a way because, Capone's bookkeeper, can you imagine his fear? Or did he enjoy his title and think he was somebody? This little geeky accountant, did he really think he was untouchable? Did he think that he was someone that was invincible because he done Capone's books? We see how Capone's at the very beginning, whenever he's getting shaved and the guy nicks him. You've seen the look on that guy's face. He was in total fear. So we know what kind of fear that he put out there for people. So what do you guys think about the differences and the characteristics in the bookkeeper and in Oscar Wallace?
To me, one of the biggest differences that stood out to me were their motives. Wallace, of course, was wanting justice. He was wanting to do the right thing. And Capone's accountant, I mean, we can only assume that money or fear would have been the biggest things keeping him in that position. And it really makes you think, I know accountants aren't one of the biggest ones, but some professions are really stereotyped and really have negative connotations. And it makes you see that depending on the person, it can be either way. It really all depends on you, what you believe in, and what your goal is.
We see him whenever he opens the bookkeeper. We see when he opens up the paper and it says that there's a subpoena out for him. And then the guy hollers from the top and says, hey, Capone says that we're leaving tonight. We're trying to escape this. You see a little bit of that fear come because he knew that he was going to have to answer for something. And is he more afraid of the law side, or is he more afraid of Capone's side? Maybe him having to not knowing what he's going to be faced with, maybe come to the decision, are you going to leak Capone's information, or are you going to save your own butt? And could he ever save his own butt? We could go on about that for a while.
That's what I was going to say. Even if Capone, in the reality of the movie where it's a little bit different from actual events, even if Capone did go to prison, he still has so many people on the outside that could easily get to the accountant. So I think it was a little bit of both. I think it was answering to the legal system as well as fear of repercussion from the gang.
Yeah, it brings up this old philosophical question from Machiavelli. I don't know if you guys have ever heard this, but Machiavelli asked the question, is it better for a leader to be feared or loved? Right. And Machiavelli said fear is the more motivating factor than love. So for this accountant character, he seems like he's completely ruled by that fear. He's very mousy compared to the Untouchables accountant, right? He becomes very confident and sure of himself as the movie progresses. This guy's very mousy. Like when he has the gun pointed at his head at the end, he's like, I'll talk, right? So it goes to show that maybe fear isn't as powerful of a motivator as we think.
Too, we may not, I think we stereotype Capone and all of the gangster people. We stereotype them as completely evil. Everyone just totally fears them, but we have to look, there's another side of them. Many times they were loved by people in their communities. And so it brings about, I think he was more hated than he was loved, but I believe there were people that loved Capone, just like a lot of the gangster types of that day. When you was from the other side of the tracks, you wanted to see the old boy do good. So I think in some ways, definitely fear had a great deal to play with being in these things. This accountant, he may have been afraid. That's why he worked for Capone. Or perhaps he loved Capone and loved the money. I'm sure he was making very, very good money. So it's just speculation on the viewer's end of how you want to picture this gentleman, if he was a gentleman. But there certainly is a contrast between the two accountants. I think we have to be careful because any type of evil, it's usually masked with something good. Capone, for some people, had some good points to him. Not me, but to some of those people that may have lived in his era, in his day.
I'm so glad you brought that up. That's something that I encountered when I was watching it. You know, I like to think from a lot of different perspectives so that I don't have bias towards one character or one group. And you have to think, in Capone's eyes, he could have been almost a Robin Hood character for his community, for his people. And to him, would he have seen the US government and those officials as the antagonists of this story? And would he have almost had a resentment towards them? Because, you know, a lot of foreigners who have never been to America, they have this preconceived notion that this place is a dream, that you can accomplish anything, that there are no boundaries. And honestly, it's just not how it is. Sadly, it's not the reality. So imagine people, I don't know, Italians suffering prosecution in Italy when a lot of them migrated to the US, or what the circumstances for that was. But imagine people running from something, coming here thinking they were going to have so many opportunities, but facing racism, facing poverty that they wouldn't have encountered before. And it really just blurs the lines between good and evil, which of course Capone's actions were not good. Hurting people is never good, no matter how you justify it.
Yeah, going back to the fear and love thing, one of the this is Al Capone's famous quote, right? About it's better to have a kind word and a gun than just a kind word, right? You guys might have even heard that quote before. It's very famous.
And Kirsten,
go ahead.
I'm sorry, I was just going to read Kirsten's chat. She said, I thought protection for Capone's bookkeeper might have also been a motive, as he would have been protected from other mobs and gangs in the city at the time. Go ahead, Corey. I'm sorry.
You're good. Capone was known as the mayor of New York the mayor of Chicago for a reason. I mean, to go back to the history side of it, 1929 is right when he started getting a bad name because of a thing that happened called the St. Valentine's Day murder. Bunch of guys that was a part of Capone's gang, dressed up as cops, went to another gang's place, acting like it was a raid, and instead of like arresting them or whatever, they just shot everybody. And that's when, literally up to that point, Al Capone was seen as a good guy. He was seen as a Robin Hood. And at that point, he was seen like more feared than not at that point. And then it was more of how can we get this guy? And that's when everything starts going down, and that's when the movie happens, basically. And this is irrelevant to what you were talking about, Nicole. What you were talking about when they were when these immigrants were immigrating from Italy. It's like I said, it's irrelevant, but Italy is going through a rough patch right now. Like their government is almost on the brink of collapse because their government is so ingrained in the mafia right now that they were trying to take down a couple mobsters, and in the process, the government was basically just collapsed on itself because it was so corrupt, for lack of a better word. It's irrelevant, but like I just thought I'd bring it up.
Well, the rise of Mussolini as a fascist dictator, right?
I love your history text, so you don't bother me with that at all, because it kind of puts everything into perspective. I mean, we talk about America and where we are at that time whenever the movie is made. So knowing other history that coincides with the movie or the themes of the movie, I think are helpful. What do you guys think about Elliot Ness? Now, he was just, well, he was a federal prohibition agent, and he was just a mere, what was he? I'm sorry about this.
Treasury officer.
Yeah, he was a treasury officer. That's all he was. And they put him in this position. Now, me personally, I think that it made it look good to the people of Chicago, like, hey, we're doing something. But they thought that because of his inexperience, whatever, he was just going to be rolled over, or maybe that he could actually even be bought. I'm not sure exactly what they were thinking there, but what do you guys, what's your views on why he was in that position and maybe how others viewed that?
Yeah,
I had never even somebody get
I was going to say, I think they put him there because they felt like he would just kind of be like a fill-in for the space. I don't think that they really thought he would stand up and do what he did, because there were so many people corrupt in the system itself. And like, just like his Al Capone's final sentencing, I don't know if anybody noticed, but the district attorney said he was facing up to 28 years, but he only got convicted of 11. So he really did get off easy in the end, either way you put it.
yeah.
Go ahead, Corey. I'm
I
sorry.
was just gonna You're good. I was just gonna say what I needed to say and get out because it wasn't nothing. And I forgot what it was. So somebody go.
I was going to say that I really enjoyed Kevin Costner's performance in this role. Kevin, I don't think that we always ask the question, what other actor could have done this part? We've asked that question several times in this class. I just can't picture anybody else but doing this role besides Kevin Costner. He's kind of got that very stoic sort of personality about him. Like, he's not a person who complains, right? He accepts life for what it is, right? He has that sort of fortitude about him. Like, that's just how Kevin Costner, the actor, is, right? I don't know if any of you guys have ever seen a lot of his other movies, but he's very much always plays this sort of reserved, quiet sort of guy who goes about his business, right? That's the type of role I normally see him in. So I just wanted to brag about his performance. Like, he's one of my favorite actors. I thought he did an exceptional job in this movie.
Yeah, he's one of mine too, and he's always just been amazing. I mean, you can see him in several different roles, but I definitely agree in how, like, we talked about Jack Nicholson's personality kind of comes out in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and in and what other movie was he in? But we talk about that, and I believe that this is a little bit of his personality coming out in this as well. I mean, we're talking about just a man that seems like he's trying to do right and just wants what's best.
I think it was almost cruel that they threw him into this position, because on the one hand, if he does what, legally he's supposed to do, his family is at stake. He is the only person out of the Untouchables that has a family. And that is so much leverage that can be held over a person. And he made it a point that no other members were people that had families. And on the other hand, if he is bought and if that's found out by the general public, then the rest of the police force and the rest of the government officials have to throw him under the bus to really protect themselves and not let all the corruption come out. And I think it was just either way you turn, it was a double-edged sword, and all of his decisions were pretty much life and death.
You notice that in the movie, like at least twice that I know of, either he mentioned or Malone mentioned to him, it's nice being married. So they wanted to make sure that they emphasized that, and that he did have that home life, and he had something to lose. We see Niddy on the other side of the street watching his family, knowing who's in the house, knowing his daughter's in the house, and that's why he gets them out of there, and talking about she's around people that she doesn't know, right now, going through and like buying things or whatever for the baby. But yeah, they definitely had that, and maybe that was another reason. It could have been another reason, finding a man with a family, a young man with a family, a inexperienced man. He had no police background, really. Malone is the one who was telling him and teaching him the officer side of the spectrum. He was always the one telling him, this is how you get information, and this is why if you don't want the information to get out, you want to keep a secret, you don't tell your boss. You see this a lot, and they look to Malone a lot. Malone was very key in this, that they looked to him a lot. I mean, look at whenever when Kevin Costner killed that guy and in the Canadian border scene, and he was so torn up, like he just couldn't believe that he actually took someone's life. And then they were trying to get information and out of this gangster. So Malone picks him up and shoots him again. And, that guy had no clue. He didn't know that he was already dead, but he had to use what he had out there. And I think that shows a little bit of the seasoned officer in him. He knew what he had to use to get what he needed. So what do you guys think about Malone?
Just a side note, this is the only Oscar Sean Connery ever won was for this movie. So feel free to talk about his performance here too, what you thought.
He played in a half a dozen Bond films, and this is what he won an Oscar for.
Mhm.
I mean, it's a good performance. Like, no lie, but seriously, James Bond, the original James Bond, didn't win a single Oscar.
Right, and you got The Rock. There's so many. If you would look up his career, it's
The
just
Medicine Man.
astronomical. Yeah, I mean, it kept on. He died at 90 last year, and he was still doing movies recently in recent history. So, he's a phenomenal actor. But just to think that the only Oscar that he had won was yeah. I mean, he done a good job. But I agree. Go ahead, Dan.
He is the perfect, what should I say? He is the perfect person to play that particular role, especially with Kevin Costner playing Elliot Ness, because when you're watching Kevin Costner, you don't know that he's acting. It's not like he's acting. It's like everything you watch of him, you're just changing a name. There was a movie out, Open Range. If you like Westerns at all, you wouldn't even have to like Westerns to like this movie. Him and Robert Duvall, they put a fabulous performance on in this. But again, you're seeing Kevin again. And so when Sean Connery comes in and is that co-star with him, man, he's just making that foundation for this movie even stronger, because with Sean Connery, I mean, look, he's been around since Moby Dick was a minute, and so he's very able to pull this off. Now he got this Oscar, but he's really not in the movie a long time. He gets killed about midway through the movie, but it just shows you that particular actor, that position in this movie, it was very necessary. It's the only way you could explain about a novice like Elliot Ness coming in and having success. He had to have an old veteran on his team, even though in reality he may not have had that guy. But in the movie, to bring the movie across, he had to make that performance.
I think they also, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think his character really put an emphasis on the corruption in this movie. I know it's a thread throughout, but the scene where he is fighting, I don't know if it's the one where he's fighting with the police chief or a little bit before that, but he looks at him and he says, "Why are you dressed like that? Why are you holding up this fantasy?" And then you start to realize the chief is calling his fantasy like the Sean's character is fighting for justice, and the police chief is calling that fantasy. And that is just so backwards. And that's really when I was like, wow. And it really hit me, like, things were like this back then. Like, even if it's not totally accurate, still this is a little glimpse into what things must have been like in that time and in that area especially.
There's a thing I've heard, because I'm just gonna enter in anytime historical accuracy is mentioned. But there's a difference between showing historically accurate things, as in like showing this thing happened at this time and this thing happened after this and not before. And then there's showing how accurate the environment was. Like, even if not all the characters are actual people, the feeling you get is exactly how it felt. And that's exactly what you pointed out is exactly it. Like, even if it's not 100% historically accurate, that's pretty much how corrupt Chicago was. And how helpless you felt in the movie is exactly how helpless good guys felt in Chicago.
Look at the beginning of the movie. Whenever we see the store owner and the little girl coming in, and before she came in, he's saying no. He's standing his ground. He's saying no to Capone and his gang. He is saying no more. This is not going to happen anymore. Well, they were already prepared for this. They must have already known that he was bucking on them, so to speak, a little bit. So if he says no, we leave the bomb. Period. Don't matter who you destroy. Doesn't matter that there was a little girl involved. Didn't even faze them that little girl walked in right whenever they were getting ready to leave that bomb. You don't just respect for human life did not matter. It was all about what they wanted when they were going to get it and however they had to get it, period. Who they had to hurt or kill along the way, so be it.
I was going to say that it's not a coincidence that I put Chinatown and this movie back to back, because both of them have the same theme, right, of corruption and all this stuff. I remember last class, I remember Regan said that Chinatown left this bad taste in her mouth at the end, right? Did you guys find this movie more hopeful and optimistic about such things?
Yeah,
I definitely did. Go ahead, Reagan. I'm sorry.
Sorry, I was just going to say I like this movie better, all just in general, and I like the ending too. It put closure to it, even if Al Capone did have a shorter sentence than what he deserved.
Did Al Capone die in prison? Correct.
No.
He didn't.
No, he was let out of prison, and he went to Florida, where he then died of syphilis. He had syphilis. They had moved him to the Rock. Mine's not working today.
Yeah.
They moved him to the Rock whenever they first opened the doors. He was one of the first inmates to go to Alcatraz. And at that time, that's whenever they found that he had syphilis. He was getting beat up by other people, because they just wanted the name of I beat up Al Capone, because Niddy, in reality, Niddy took over the gang once Capone was out. So once he was in, it was as if he was forgotten. He was pushed aside and he was not protected anymore. And he was, losing his mind due to the syphilis. So they had to get him out of there. His wife went in to visit at one point and just seeing what kind of shape he was in physically. He was just morbidly obese. And so she takes him to Florida, where he spends, his comfortable last days. They said it was actually raining on the day that he had died. And then they brought him back to Chicago, but they would not wouldn't let his body be transported how they normally would transport it, just because of who he was. But no, he did not die in prison.
I'm left with a feeling of I'm like Reagan that I feel better about the ending here and a little hope, more so than the previous movie. Although it also brings about with me a question: how can you be so dedicated to one thing or the other? There's people that are dedicated to the right. Ness and his group of men are dedicated to the law and to see that things are done in a just way. And they're kind of sold out to that. They're sold out to the point where they're willing to give their life. Now, I think there was something in the movie that they were all in, no matter what it took. And then on the other side of the coin, you've got a guy like Frank Niddy, who had dedicated himself to Al Capone, and no doubt others like the bookkeeper, the accountant, and they have dedicated themselves to corruption. Shows you something about the human being itself, doesn't it? That there's a war going on between us, inside of us, to do right, to do wrong. When I think it was Yogi Berra once said, when you come to the fork of the road, take it. Well, you think about that for a little while, you got decisions to make. So anyway, that's this movie. I love this movie. Anything that Kevin Costner in, I would watch. But when I leave this movie, I'm still wondering inside, how could anybody be so dedicated one way or the other? And so I'm kind of left with a big question mark for myself.
But even in the movie, you have Jim Malone that he's quoted, you want to get Capone, here's how you get him. He pulls a knife, you pull a gun. He sends one of yours to the hospital, you send one of his to the morgue. That's the Chicago way. And then Elliot Ness is like, yeah, well, you're not from Chicago. In another conversation, they had such pride in their city and they did not want it overtaken by these guys. And I think that in Our Good and Evil, you look at in Chinatown, it's kind of like you had one guy that was on the good side and everybody else was kind of, well, they're up for whatever. Here you see a team and they've got such a love for their people and their city that they live in that they're willing to put it all on the line. Even in Malone's last dying words, he thinks he's reaching for that little trinket that he kept with him about an officer, but he instead is trying to find that train who all was on there, and he says, what are you going to do? Okay, he already knew, okay, the bookkeeper's going to be there. Well, what are you going to do? What do you plan to do? So even in his last dying words, he's cheering for him and asking him, what are you going to do? Like, are you going to give up because I'm laying here like this? Are you going to run scared, or you have this information now? What are you going to do about it? So, I mean, I think that gives you a little bit more hope and faith than Chinatown actually did.
Just an interesting fact about the ending of this movie. De Palma originally shot a scene that the movie would come full circle. You started out with a press conference with Al Capone, and you would end with a press conference of Al Capone in prison, right? So he still has this like swagger in prison, like, ha ha ha, I still have power. But he cut that out because he thought that would give it a Chinatown like ending, right? That evil wins even in the end. So good call.
That's interesting.
I was going to say a question for everybody. Sean Connery hated this movie, because he thought it was too blood and gory. He doesn't like that aspect of De Palma's directing. What do you guys think? Do you guys think that the use of blood and gore in the film was effective? Do you think that it was used needlessly, per se? Especially the scene where Sean Connery dies. He's crawling through the apartment, blood's everywhere, right? But there's lots of scenes too where you see people's heads blown off. It's a very bloody movie. So what do you guys
think? It's necessary. I mean, it's absolutely necessary in this genre and in this film period. Now, if the mob and mafia had their own genre, I mean, I'd be all for it, and that'd probably be my favorite. But people have to realize they had to get a glimpse of that and realize exactly how brutal and careless it was, and how no respect for life, none. It was nothing to kill kids, to kill women, men, it didn't matter. At one point in America, we look at, oh, you don't harm the women and children. Well, at this point, it didn't matter. Whoever's in the way, get them out of the way. So I believe it was absolutely necessary.
I think
Agreed.
it kind of, sorry.
Go ahead, Reagan.
I was going to say, I think it kind of gave it like its timelessness, because look at our gore in the movies today. Like, that is light compared to what we see today. Look at The Walking Dead, for instance. Like, I feel like it really played into it being as popular today, the movie itself.
When two of the more dramatic shots in the movie had blood in it. They had there was the one where, like you said, when you have the blood trail of seeing his body go all the way across this hallway, and then you see him reaching for the piece of paper, and it's got blood all over it, like that. It adds to it. It's like kind of, it just adds it just adds to it. I can't really find the words for it, but it just adds to the impact of the scene. And even with when, good Lord, I'm blanking. When Al Capone, there we go, jeez. When Al Capone takes the baseball bat and hits the guy in the head, and you see the red blood go across the white table, and everything's all clean except for this one just patch of blood, like that makes it much more of an impactful shot. Oh, hi. My niece just came in.
Dr.
But-
Yeager and I were talking about the color in this. Usually whenever you have a good guy and a villain, you've got the good guy in white and the villains in black. I mean, that's normally what we look at in our movies, especially of early times. Well, Capone was always in white. He was actually known for his white hat. So, and in the beginning, you see him in this white suit, and at the opera, he's going in the white suit, and we see Ness with his white shirt on always. So what do we make of that?
I never thought about him wearing white and being evil, but that was a great choice. Like, that's perfect, honestly.
Now that
I think it's to make him stand out, to make him seem like he's a good guy, like a wolf in sheep's clothing type deal, because he tried to make people think he was, I'm for you, I'm for what's right, I'm a good guy.
Definitely. And I always love in a movie when the bad guy is he's very exact and he's very clean. I don't know why, but that just kind of adds to the brutality of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's one thing to see a guy do it like Texas Chainsaw Massacre style and take somebody apart like that. Like, there's that, but it hits a lot different when you see somebody in a tuxedo that comes off as very kind and very characteristic. To see him get out a gun or a baseball bat and start ruthlessly killing somebody, it adds to the shock, I guess.
Dr. Yeager, what was you going to say about it?
I was going to say, now that I think about it, John Huston's character in Chinatown were white too. I didn't think about that the other day, but
Neither.
As far as the blood and gore and all that, I hate it. I absolutely hate it. But I'd rather watch Toy Story. But for the movie, for the movie, I think it needed that extra exclamation point to let us know who Al Capone really was, not the white suited Al Capone, but the dark hearted Al Capone. Because, like Corey said, some of this is validated through history. They really did kill people, and they really did kill them in ways that we wouldn't want to see. But in order to understand the difference between the good guy, the bad guy, the Untouchables, and the mob, I believe we have to endure. I would be enduring it. Endure those scenes because they are very valuable to the film itself. Now, you may say, well, I don't like that kind of thing. Well, me either. But it is part of the mystique that goes along with the history and with that type of movie that we're watching. And anyway, we all have a choice what kind of movies we want to watch. But I love some things that have a historical background. Some of it's true, some of it's a little mystery. So I think it's needed, even though we may not put it in ourselves. I think it makes the movie.
To add to that, sorry, just
No,
real
you
quick.
go on, Corey.
Just real quick. To add to that, the scene with the baseball bat, that actually happened. Al Capone really did whack somebody with a baseball bat.
I was actually going to touch on what you said a moment ago. You normally don't encounter movies where, I'm not going to say normally, but at this point, you didn't see well-dressed, nice-looking people doing gory, horrible crimes. You saw either monsters, stereotypical bad guys, or things like that. And it really raises the question, just because somebody has money and just because somebody dresses well and looks well, it doesn't make them good. A lot of times, even today, we have that assumption about people. We see a well-dressed person who looks like a good part of society, and we assume, oh, they're a good person. When in reality, a lot of the worst people in the world are people who wear suits and people who do these things.
Yeah, I mean, the mob they're notorious for dressing up, always having a suit on. I mean, you look in other movies, the Goodfellas, he was telling him, like, you dress like me. I'm a big mob movie kind of gal, but you're supposed to dress up. You are supposed to have that. So they don't care a bit to go in with a 3-piece suit on and cut your head off. It don't matter. At least in that day.
Yeah, so to wrap everything up, since we're quickly running out of time, I just wanted to say that this question of violence, like how much is too much in a movie, we're going to keep answering that question, especially over the next few classes when we talk about Westerns, right? Because violence and Westerns go hand in hand, right? So I'll be interested to further continue this discussion over the next few days. So I just wanted to say too, Crystal did a very good job. So you guys, so for everybody who's doing presentations in the future, her handout was the gold standard. Okay, so you guys can kind of emulate.
She set the bar high.
She did. So
Thank you.
So use that model that she produced. Like that will be very good from here on out. But to give you guys a preview of our next film, we're starting Westerns. I've only got 3 Westerns on the syllabus. That kind of breaks my heart a little because of Westerns. But also real quick, wanted to ask you guys, what's your final thoughts on film noir? This is it as far as their genre goes.
I love it.
I love it.
I think it's a category that is very, very interesting. course, now probably that's one of Crystal and I get a lot of talking about that. We like that era of the 20s and 30s and all that. So it's one of my favorites.
I think that film noir has been monumental as far as setting the standard for even modern films, as far as experimenting with new angles, lighting, not special effects, sound effects and things like that. It really was just outstanding and was leading in that category.
So far, noir has been my favorite genre. I mean, I know we've only done this in drama, and drama's, no offense to drama, it's more of like the default genre. But it so far, like I love noir as a genre in general. It's all of the movies we've watched so far have been top of the line for me.
Yeah, I agree. I'm a huge fan, and like I said, I didn't even know it was actually a specific genre that I absolutely loved beforehand. And I really have enjoyed it, and I think that the movies that we've watched, there's some that I've seen and some that I hadn't seen, and it made a difference in opening my eye up. I think there was so much that I could have wrote on every movie, and even this one, whenever I went to write it out, I wanted to write about the characters as well, like what they done in the movie, but it makes that a little lengthy. So I think that was my biggest thing. But I appreciate everybody's participation today for sure, because that helped me out a whole lot, which I didn't doubt that the class would come through for me. And I thought that everybody would enjoy this movie. It's more modern than what we've been watching, and it's an interesting subject to me. And even if you're not into the mob stuff, the kind of good, bad, and evil and all of that throws something in there. So I really appreciated everybody's talk and your responses to everything.
If we were all in a classroom, we would all clap.
Well, thank you.
Again, Crystal, you did awesome, and you left some big shoes for us to fill, but I'm sure we're all going to meet the bar.
Oh, I know you will. I know you will. Thank you so much, Nicole. I appreciate that. But I don't have any doubts or anything negative with anybody in this class. I think that this is an amazing class. I wish that we could continue it, and like, instead of book clubs, we'll just have a movie club. We'll meet once a month after class. We'll all Zoom and be like talking about what we're wanting, what this movie was that we watched. I'd be all about
it's
that.
A possibility.
Let me just real quick to sum up, give you a preview of The Searchers. Okay, The Searchers is a 1956 film. It's directed by John Ford. You guys, we've already watched one John Ford film in this class, The Grapes of Wrath. So, we have that. Ford is known for his great collaborations with John Wayne. John Wayne is our main actor in this next film. John Wayne has this sort of wholesome reputation, like this wholesome American hero, very stoic. But he plays a much different character in this movie than he's accustomed to. So we've talked about race a lot in this class. This movie is very heavily grounded in 1950s discourses on racism and stuff, because John Wayne's character is very racist in this movie. So I'll be interested to hear what your thoughts are. It's classic, like most directors will say, this movie's like in the top 5 ever, The Searchers. It's got a very big reputation as a keystone in the Western genre, if not the drama too. So it's got John Wayne. I'll be interested to hear what you guys think about John Wayne. It's got Natalie Wood too. You guys might know her from West Side Story, right? The musical. She has an interesting history we'll talk about a little bit. A great film. It's about Native Native Americans are the villains in the movie. So I'll be interested to hear what you guys have to say about that. Yeah, so it'll be a nice entry into the Western. So it's nice because it's not conventional to Westerns, but at the same time, it's a good cinema too. So I'll be interested. For those of you who like Star Wars in here, look out for a scene near the beginning. You will see a scene that George Lucas ripped out of The Searchers and put into Star Wars. So look for it. I'm not going to spoil it. Look for it. You'll know it when you see it. So yeah, just a bit about that. So I'll get your questions up this evening. The Searchers is on HBO Max. In case some of you guys have HBO Max, it's on there. I will look forward to it. So until next time, guys, take care.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one. Thanks, Dr. Yeager.
Well,
I appreciate your help.
you did good. You did good.
Thank you. I expect that A, okay?
Don't worry about it. So.
Okay. Thank you.